Together, we will channel our common pain back into our common purpose. Together, America, we will rise. I'm Cory Booker, and I'm running for President of the United States of America.
New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, now the latest Democrat to throw his hat officially in the ring, announcing his race for president in a video released earlier this morning on this, the first day of Black History Month. Booker joins the 7 other Democrats who already announced their candidacy for president and the 20-plus other politicians rumored to be vying for the nomination. Joining me now, MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki, MSNBC senior political editor Beth Phui, Mark Thompson, radio host for Sirius XM Progress, and former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman. Governor, we got to go Jersey Pride first. Talk to us about the New Jersey aspect here. Cory Booker, junior senator from my home state, longtime Newark mayor, raised in the NJ. How's that going to play for him?
I think it's going to play well. I mean, like any person who's been in public office, people are going to scrutinize the record and they're going to find things to pick apart. But Cory's attractive. He's articulate. He represents a new face and not an extreme face of the Democrat Party. I think he's going to position himself very well to be seriously considered. And of course, there always is New Jersey pride. We've got a lot to be proud of, but it's nice to have someone who will be taken seriously and has the kind of record that will stand up to some scrutiny.
I mean, who doesn't love the Garden State? Certainly nobody.
Nobody who knows it.
Yes, that's true. It's a hidden treasure. Okay, Steve, break this down for us. We have 8 candidates already running. Some have said there's more than 20 possibilities. Paint the picture. It's a crowded one.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see where Cory Booker, could fit into this. One thing that I'm struck by, if you look at his political career in New Jersey, of course, Newark mayor, the race that made him famous originally. Remember that documentary that got made, Street Fight, about his campaign for mayor of Newark? What some people forget, I think, he lost that campaign that documentary was about. It was in 2002. He was running against an incumbent mayor of Newark named Sharpe James. He lost the campaign.
And that was like a Newark stronghold. I mean, he was running against the establishment.
He was running against the establishment. He was running against a very interesting politician. But one of the dynamics that emerged from that was Cory Booker initially was much more popular outside of the city of Newark. He was popular in the suburbs of New Jersey, the bedroom communities of New Jersey. He was known within New Jersey as one of the favorite Democrats of Republicans in that state because he'd gone against the machine. He supported charter schools. He went against the teachers union. He had good relationships with Wall Street, with Silicon Valley, even with hedge funds.
Will that not pose a problem for him now?
It's interesting because what I've seen in the last couple of years from Cory Booker, the Democratic Party has certainly changed in the era of Donald Trump. Cory Booker has changed, I think, his posture a little bit, particularly towards corporate money. He said last year he wasn't going to take a cent from corporate PACs during this campaign. It's a departure, certainly, from what we saw in the past. But what's interesting is if you do look in the past, he does have that ability. You think of him as the mayor in Newark, but his appeal initially was much stronger in the suburbs and in the bedroom communities. That could be a powerful thing if he could recapture it.
All right, he's already on his way to Iowa next week. Beth, you have been there reporting. What do people there say they want?
Yeah, I mean, people are excited about Cory Booker in Iowa. I mean, right now, everybody, Democratic activists across the country, they want a winner. So what they're looking for is somebody who can beat Trump, who can, get up into his face and beat Trump. So, Cory Booker has an opportunity here. He's a very interesting candidate. He'd be the obviously second black man to be president, first black man in this field. He'd also be the first bachelor president. He'd be the first vegan president. He was vetted to be Hillary Clinton's vice president in 2016. Came very close. He was sort of at the top of the list of folks that they were interviewing. But I heard from a number of people in the Clinton campaign that they just didn't sense that he was ready to be commander in chief. And that was ultimately the criteria that they needed to use to decide. So ultimately, Hillary Clinton picked Tim Kaine. So the real rap on Cory Booker is that he's a lot of charisma, he's a lot of flash, a little bit less substantive. So
Couldn't you say the same thing about Donald Trump?
Well, Democratic activists are looking for something other than Donald Trump, and that's what Cory Booker's going to need to persuade voters that he's not only just charismatic, great talker, great story, but that he can deliver on substance.
How does he set himself apart, Mark?
Well, I think he already has. We were just talking outside. Cory is probably, frankly, the best orator in the field right now. And I think even in terms of what Steve was talking about, rebranding himself from appearing to be so corporate and so hedge fundish, he's on the stump telling his personal story in a preacher's cadence and with a hoop, really. And he's good at that. And you kind of need that, in this party. A couple of firsts in this, though, Stephanie. The Democratic Party has sort of an embarrassment of riches with so many women and now two viable African Americans. Never had two viable African Americans to compete. So come Super Tuesday, where the black vote is very significant, you will have Kamala Harris and Cory Booker competing for that, and that's pretty historic.
But is that a good or a bad thing?
No, I think it's good. I think it's good because there ought to be a wide debate. People ought to have as many choices as possible, and it refines the stones, if you will. So everybody's got to be there. Again, you have 4 women competing, 2 African Americans competing, and the good thing about it, we may very well end up for the first time with 2 women on a ticket, maybe 2 African Americans on a ticket, maybe a woman and an African American with some overlap. That hasn't happened. This is Black History Month, by the way, Black History Fact. That has not happened since 1872, when Victoria Woodhull, a white woman, was on a ticket for vice president with Frederick Douglass. She was the president, he was vice president on the Equal Rights Party.
I might make one point on the fact that he's getting on February 1st. That's a great, symbolically great. It's Black History Month. It also means he missed a whole month of fundraising for the presidential race.
Oh.
So he's only going to have 2 months before that first report comes out for the first quarter. So he's really got to catch up. He's only got 2 months to basically look like he's playing in the same league as a Kamala Harris or an Elizabeth Warren, who got in much earlier. So it was kind of a decision he made probably symbolically to get in at Black History Month, but it does put him monetarily a little bit of a disadvantage.
And for the scientists over here, that's important too, because if everybody's competing for small dollar donations in such a crowded field, we're really going to see what the real tests are. That's going to be the test, because I think the goal would be to have over 1 million small dollar donors by the end of this year. So that's what everybody's going to be racing to get done. That's right? That's a good number, right?
Yeah, I think one of the other things to keep in mind when you talk about South Carolina Super Tuesday, potentially, right, 2 black candidates, large black populations down there, I do think it sets up some extra importance potentially for those leadoff contests in Iowa and New Hampshire, from the sense that they tend to winnow the field.
Right.
And if Kamala Harris, if Cory Booker can break out in Iowa and New Hampshire, you think of the Obama example from 2008, the minute he won Iowa, his support in South Carolina overnight doubled, and he ended up winning South Carolina overwhelmingly, catapulted him to the nomination. I wonder what effect a strong showing in one of those early states could do to set up a candidate heading into the southern states.
Governor, President Trump told the New York Times he thinks Kamala Harris may be the winner of the primary. Is that a sign that he's most threatened by her?
With him, who knows? I haven't figured out how he thinks, except I know it tells me he's the brightest person on earth. I mean, knows more than the Congressional Budget Office or his intelligence chiefs. But I don't know. He seems to try to embarrass people into running that he wants to have run against him. So maybe he does think that she'd be the easiest for him to beat. I don't think he ever thinks anybody can beat him, and certainly doesn't think anybody's his equal. So, I mean, seriously, it's hard to know what his thinking is on this, save what we've seen him do before, which is, as he has done with the CEO of Starbucks, trying to say, well, he could never beat me, as a way to kind of shaming him into running in the hopes that he would pull enough votes to allow Trump to regain a second term.
Harris definitely has momentum right now, because she got out of the gate. One of the disadvantages when the other candidates are still in exploratory mode, there's not as much as they're able to do. You don't get the big first town hall, so to speak, like we saw the other night. So Elizabeth Warren's still in exploratory mode. She might want to go ahead and get out of that phase. Bernie has yet to announce. I mean, the longer you wait. So you think about it, the 2 that are really out there, or 3, so you've got Julian Castro, he's out there.
Kirsten
Gillibrand there. She's not exploratory still?
She's exploratory, but she's out there.
She's out there.
Sherrod Brown's been visiting the great state of Ohio.
And what he's doing
Mike
is
Bloomberg's on the road.
What he's doing is interesting, because it's not even exploratory. It's a dignity of work to it, which is kind of creative. But he's running. And can I tell you how I know that? I can confirm he's running. All right, and I don't think I'm speaking out of cool to say this. I'm on the board in Selma, the Jubilee. We organize the commemoration of Bloody Sunday every year, the only such commemoration of an annual civil rights event. And we invite all the elected officials and candidates. And Sherrod Brown was one of the first to confirm the other day that he will be marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with us in Selma. He's probably not going to do that if he's not going to run for president. So this is going to be very interesting.
Beth, is there a chance that the ultra-liberal policy proposals that we've seen put forth already or that are floating about could divide the Democratic Party?
Well, that's certainly what Republicans are hoping. The reporting I've done and in just sort of looking at this field, I don't believe that they will be that far apart ideologically, nor do I think that this is going to be a super issue-focused election. I mean, we've had some interesting discussions around Elizabeth Warren's, millionaire tax, wealth tax, the discussion of Medicare for all. We're going to see Democrats more or less on the same spectrum, very close on the spectrum on most issues. There's a belief that there should be universal health care at this point, but how does that get accomplished? There's not going to be people who are, perhaps except for Mike Bloomberg, who is going to sort of
or Howard Schultz.
Right, but he's not running in the Democratic primary.
Yes.
Who might scoff at that. But for the most part, the candidates are going to be fairly aligned on issues. Again, it's really going to be how do they distinguish themselves from each other, and how do they present in a way that makes Democrats confident that they could actually beat Trump. Those are going to be the criteria in this election.
Governor, such a crowded field. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing for Democrats?
Well, it wasn't a very good thing for Republicans because, unfortunately, it gave Trump the ability to outbully everybody. And you had those 2 tiers of debates, which was ridiculous because you had some very competent, good, qualified candidates who didn't make the big stage and therefore were assumed to be non-entities and not serious. So it could be a problem for them. I mean, it's nice to have the diversity. It is good to see so many people wanting to engage and who are really motivated by what's gone on the last 3 years. So that part is healthy, but I think it could be a problem for them because it certainly was for the Republicans in the last cycle.
I see all those faces and I think about all the wasted money that's about to get raised. Imagine if that money went to our public education system.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.